The football industry is one of the most lucrative in the world, worth billions of pounds every year. And it made me think, what are the most sold football products of all time? So today I'm going to be testing out the most sold boots, gloves and football to see what the hype is really about. And then at the end of the video, I've made my prediction for what I think will soon be the most sold ball ever made. After the ball itself, the boots are probably the most important bit of kit you're going to buy, but which pair has sold more than any others? There's three ways we can look at this, the first being the most sold boot on today's market.
So when it comes to modern football boots, it doesn't get any more popular than the Nike Mercurial Vapor. This is a really nice boot, lightweight, looks cool, nice to play in, so no surprise why it's sold so well.
This chart shows the percentage of players in the top 5 leagues and what boots they wear, and in each and every league the Nike Vapor tops the list. It's hard to get an exact figure on sales of this boot as Nike haven't released any figures, but it's clear to see that it's very successful for them. So the Nike Vapors are the most sold boots of today, but next up I'll test out the best selling boot franchise of all time, and surprisingly the Nike Mercurial is not the winner. Next up we take a look at the most iconic and best selling boot franchise of all time. Probably unsurprisingly, it's the Adidas Predator that takes this victory. These boots have been around since 1994 and are still going strong today. Many famous players have worn these boots over the years, adding to its popularity, such as David Beckham and Zinedine Zidane. Part of the success of this boot is how often Adidas have changed it up and kept it fresh. As you can see, these boots are just a few years apart but look totally different. Predator boots are famous for their rubber elements, giving them extra curve. Let's test them out. So as a franchise, the Adidas Predators have sold more than any other boot, but now we're taking a look at the big one, the #1 most sold football boot of all time, and I think this is going to surprise you a little bit.
So in this box I have the most sold football boot of all time, and I want you to guess in the comments right now which boot you think is inside this box. No cheating. 3, 2, 1. Alright, guesses are in. Let's see if you got it right.
The most sold football boot of all time is the Adidas Copa Mundial, which is Spanish for World Cup. An iconic boot that's made from kangaroo leather. It's been the most sold boot in the world since 2001. Let's find out why.
It's just started to tip it down, which is actually perfect weather for testing the coppers out. They're actually really soft. They're made of kangaroo leather. Let's test them out and see if we can find out why they're so popular. These boots were released in 1979 ahead of the 1982 World Cup in Spain. That means they've been around 44 years, and maybe their longevity is part of the reason why they're such a good selling football boot.
Boots have been worn by the likes of Zinedine Zidane, Franz Beckenbauer and Maradona over the years, which have added to their popularity. In 2023 I don't see that many people wearing these at all, especially not a younger crowd, so I'm guessing it won't be long before a new boot takes its place as the #1 bestseller.
Honestly, with the coppers on, there's nothing better than just smashing a half volley on a wet surface. So nice.
Also, no well-known footballer has worn these boots in years, further reducing their popularity for new generations.
These are the most sold football boots of all time, so I was slightly surprised when I heard rumours that this summer Adidas are going to stop making them.
So there we have it, the most sold football boot of all time. But will Adidas halt production of this timeless classic? Now, whilst I was putting these boots away, the doorbell rang and my next product arrived.
Say whichever gift you want.
Now next up, I decided to take a look on Amazon and see what were the best selling football products on there.
And this was the ball that topped the list, a £9.99 Mitre football. Let's see why it's so popular. First things first, it's one of the cheapest balls by a well-known brand on the site, so that's at least one of the reasons. It's a pretty clean design and it seems like the sort of football you'd buy in bulk for training.
Let's have some shots with this ball to test it out. honestly, to say how cheap this ball is, it's actually really nice to strike. Oh. So the one thing I can say about this ball is it doesn't have much grip on it, so it can be a bit slippy, but apart from that, it's a really good football.
What's funny is the day after I tested this ball out, I was working out in my garage and noticed that I've already bought this football previously myself, so you might want to check to see if you have one of these in your collection.
What are the chances in that?
But seriously, for the price, this is a good football. Next up, I wanted to see what were the best-selling goalie gloves on Amazon, and it was pretty surprising. These non-branded gloves costing £8.99 were top of the list, but let's try and find out why. They weren't terrible, but they definitely didn't offer as much grip compared to a top-end glove. But for the price, that's to be expected. I think the reason these are so popular is similar to the football. People are looking for a cheap pair of gloves just to use in their five-a-side match. And for that, they're absolutely fine. But if you're serious about being a keeper, you would probably perform better in a slightly more expensive glove if your budget can stretch that far. Now, before we move on to the big one, the footballs, we're going to take a look at the most sold kits of all time. First up, let's look at club kits. As you can see, Man United are top in the list with over 3 million shirts sold, followed by Real Madrid and then Bayern Munich. This is the list for 2022, but it's very similar each year. The only surprise to me was to see Bayern so high up, but apart from that, it's as you'd expect. Now the international kits are more surprising. These are the sales from the 2018 World Cup, and Mexico sold more than any other team, and England are not even in the top 5. Now we're going to look at the most sold individual kit of all time. Coming in at number 3, and this one surprised me a little bit, it's Lewandowski's Bayern shirt, which sold over 970,000 times in his final season there. Number 2 is Ronaldo's Man United shirt with just over 1 million sales. And coming in at number 1 is Messi's home shirt at PSG, the season he signed there, with Messi 30 on the back. It sold over 1.2 million shirts. Now these shirt sales are impressive, but they've got nothing on the numbers when we compare them to the footballs.
Now we've got the big one. What is the best-selling football of all time? And I'm going to give you the top 3.
So first off, I'm going to test out the official top 3 most sold balls. Then at the end, I'll show you my prediction for the ball that I think will be the future bestseller.
Now, the number 3 ball on the list, I don't have exact figures for this ball, unlike the rest in the video, but I have good reason to believe it belongs in the top 3, and here's why.
So the third best-selling ball of all time is the Adidas Tango, a football that was recently described by Soccer Bible as the most iconic ball ever made. Released in 1978, its classic design makes it very much the Copa Mundial of footballs. This ball has been used in 6 major tournaments, including World Cups and Euros, so its time in the spotlight is definitely one of the reasons for its immense popularity, also making it one of the most recognisable footballs of all time. But what's it like to play with?
Now the younger audiences watching this video may not even recognise this ball, but it is one of the most iconic balls of all time, and some even say it's the greatest football ever made.
So the Adidas Tango comes in at the number 3 spot, and whilst I've only ever heard positive things about this ball, unfortunately the same can't be said for number 2 on the list. Now the second most sold football is somewhat of a surprise to see on this list, but also kinda not, seeing as it is one of the most famous balls ever made. It's the Jabulani. Adidas sold over 13 million of these controversial balls, and I'll keep it fairly short as I've tested this ball in depth before. But for a football that was so heavily criticised, it's funny to see it so high on the list. But unlike the Jabulani, the most sold ball of all time performed perfectly.
Now we have the best-selling football of all time. Well, at least I'm pretty sure it is. There is one more possible contender, but I'll talk about that at the end of the video. So, the most sold football of all time is the Adidas Bazooka. Let's test this thing out.
Now this ball was the perfect storm for Adidas, coming into the Brazil World Cup in 2014. The hype around the tournament was huge, and they delivered a near perfect football.
With sparkles when we meet, go dance on the cheek, 'cause there ain't nobody.
14 million match balls were sold at €160 each, and 42 million balls sold overall in the Bazooka design, which is insane. And it led to Adidas' most successful year in football financially, and it was the first football to generate over $1 billion in sales.
Ain't nobody else than you. Rub me up.
So this could be a pretty bold statement, but I think the Bazooka could be the best football of all time.
My weaknesses, prettier without them.
So that's the Adidas Bazooka, as far as I'm aware, the most sold ball of all time. But as I mentioned earlier, there is one ball that could beat it, but the figures aren't in yet, and that is the Al Rilla, the World Cup ball from 2022. This ball has been everywhere for over a year now, so it really wouldn't surprise me if this football soon becomes the most sold in the world.